Hey, RetconRaider here. Once again, July was a very busy month for Phoenix Point. Not only did we get Backer Build 2, but we also received multiple official updates, news about the upcoming Backer Build 3 and briefing number 6, and we got our first look at the official development roadmap. Now, obviously, I already spent some time talking about Backer Build 2, so we'll just skip over that for now. If you want to find out more about the new pre-alpha backer build that was released back in early July, you can check out my June update video, my dedicated Backer Build 2 gameplay video, or one of the official Backer Build 2 videos released by Snapshot Games. I'll include some links in the comments section below. Besides, even without Backer Build 2, we've still got a lot to talk about. So, let's get started. First, let's talk about what may be the biggest news we received in July, Backer Build 3, which was officially announced on the Snapshot Games website on July 31st. According to Julian Gollop, this will be the most ambitious pre-alpha build yet, intended to give us a much better idea of what the final game will be like. This announcement coincided with the release of our first official development roadmap, which you can explore over on Trello. According to this roadmap, Backer Build 3 will include a functional geoscape and strategic layer for the game. This will allow the player to select and equip their squads, then send them out to explore the world around them, looting scavenging sites, raiding alien structures, and working alongside some of the game's planned factions. The roadmap even goes into detail on some of the new content that we'll theoretically be receiving in Backer Build 3, like the Phoenix Project's versions of the Heavy and Sniper class. In addition to several new renders showing possible variations of these basic classes, the roadmap also provides us with some very basic information about how these classes will function. Most notably, it mentions that the Phoenix Project version of these classes will be less armored but also more mobile than the variants used by the new Jericho faction. Their default equipment will also be different. For example, while the new Jericho Heavy uses machine guns and missile launchers, the Phoenix Project Heavy will instead use grenade launchers and heavy cannons. While they'll initially lack the jump jets and shoulder-mounted missile launchers used by new Jericho, a developer note clarifies that they'll still be able to use them if the player can somehow capture or trade for that technology. It's also interesting how the roadmap makes repeated references to how Phoenix Project units will be more agile but less durable than their counterparts from New Jericho. Based on what we've heard so far, it sounds like New Jericho units will be slow but well-armed and heavily armored, while Sanhedrion's units will be stealthy and highly mobile, but presumably far less armored. This would imply that the Phoenix Project will fit somewhere between the two extremes, with the player's research and development decisions deciding which direction to take them in. Based on the teasers we've seen over the past couple of months, it's probably safe to assume that the developers are hoping to include all three of the Phoenix Project's core classes in Backer Build 3. The roadmap mentions the Heavy and Sniper by name, as well as a wide variety of Phoenix Project weapons, such as the Assault Rifle, Sniper Rifle, Heavy Cannon, Heavy Grenade Launcher, Pistol, and Hand Grenade. And we already saw the concept renders for the new Phoenix Project shotgun just last month. It's also interesting to note that, based on the recent concept art, these weapons appear to be more conventional ballistic weaponry, as opposed to new Jericho's more advanced Gauss weaponry. What's more, the development roadmap mentions that Backer Build 3 will also include the promotional chitin armor and alien living weapons. This all seems to indicate that the new Backer Build will provide the player with a fairly wide variety of equipment to choose from. Of course, the player won't be the only one getting new toys to play with. Backer Build 3 will also provide the Pandora virus with a much greater arsenal of genetically mutated weapons to deploy against the Phoenix Project. Not only will the Crab Queen be getting a larger set of animations and special effects, but the new build will also include functional versions of several new mutant enemies. This includes the Kairon, the living artillery platform that the developers have been teasing us with over the past several months, as well as the more recently revealed Siren. It also includes the towering Behemoth, a city-sized mutant that will utterly destroy any haven that it comes across, unless the player can somehow find a way to stop it. In addition, the list also appears to be populated with several new types of smaller alien minions, including the fireworms that were revealed last month, as well as the facehugger, which may refer to the revamped larva that the developers showed us back in March. Other aliens on the list include the Egg and the Goo Pod, which will likely spawn these new minions, as well as something called the Sentinel, which we don't know anything about at all. While the developers are keeping a lot of the specific details under wraps, one thing they did decide to tease us with was this new variant of the Kairon, which they've dubbed the Worm Launcher. Based on the name, it's probably safe to assume that this particular mutation will allow the Kairon to spawn fireworms on the battlefield. This is similar to the Juggernaut, which Julian recently described as being another type of mutant which could also continuously spawn fireworms, even after the player had killed it. The developers are also hard at work with new environmental maps for us to encounter and explore. According to the development roadmap, the developers are currently working on props and buildings for new Jericho havens, independent havens, Phoenix Point bases, and alien structures. They're also working on some of the more dynamic features of these maps, including the living alien mist, as well as the destructible terrain system. The developers went into a little more detail about these new maps in the official update that was released on July 25th. They showcased numerous new props and structures planned for use in new Jericho havens, revealing that not only will these change based on what faction controls the area, but also based on what district you happen to be fighting in. Thus far, the backer build has only featured terrain from the new Jericho Industrial Zone, but future builds will also include residential zones, military zones, food production areas, and so on. Every building will have a fully detailed interior, and many of these buildings will be multiple stories tall. That means that the player will either need to get used to fighting in cramped quarters, or they'll need to make sure that they always bring along enough firepower to knock down a few walls. Of course, New Jericho isn't the only faction that's getting this kind of attention. Backer Build 3 will also include independent havens, as well as the player's base of operations, Phoenix Point, the last remaining Phoenix Project facility. Details on these locations are particularly scarce, but the developers did share a few unfinished teaser images. This includes what appears to be a residential structure from an independent haven, as well as 2 interior shots of a Phoenix Project base. While we can't glean much information from these images just yet, perhaps the most notable detail is the inclusion of a massive new Phoenix Project dropship, with VTOL engines and what appear to be numerous missile pods. The developers also shared this new concept art for various possible alien structures that the player might end up facing. Much like the mutants spawned by the Pandora virus, these structures are actually massive living creatures designed to create even more mutant foot soldiers. This recent concept art also seems to imply that some of these alien structures may actually be mobile, potentially allowing them to reposition themselves on the geoscape. We've already heard a little about these structures in some of the recent interviews with Julian Gollop. They'll apparently start off relatively small, spawning basic mutants that will scour the immediately surrounding area for organic material that they can harvest. As the structures upgrade, however, they'll begin spawning even more powerful mutants, such as boss monsters like the Crab Queen or the massive Haven-destroying behemoth. Based on the current development roadmap, Backer Build 3 is going to have a lot to offer, which, unfortunately, brings us to the bad news. While the developers had originally hoped to update the Backer Build on a bi-monthly basis, the sheer volume of new content planned for Backer Build 3 will require more time to complete. That means that we won't actually be getting our hands on this new build until November. It's disappointing, of course, but there are still a lot of other teasers to help keep us entertained in the meantime. While a lot of the new content revealed on the development roadmap is directly related to Backer Build 3, it also gives us a glimpse at some of the other pieces of content that the developers are currently working on. This notably includes the havens and units for both Synedrion and the Disciples of Anu. While no pictures are included, the list does confirm several of the classes that we've already heard about, such as the Berserker, Mutog Handler, and Priest for the Disciples of Anu, as well as a new Synedrion unit called the Militia. Similarly, the roadmap also confirms numerous new vehicles for 3 of the main human factions. For example, New Jericho already has the Armadillo, but they'll also be getting a revised version of the mech we saw back in March. In addition, they'll have at least 2 different types of flying vehicles, a fighter and a transport. The Phoenix project will be getting the Scarab as their dedicated ground vehicle, as well as 3 different types of flying vehicles, the basic helicopter, the interceptor, and the transport. Again, no pictures are included, but it's possible that we may have seen one or more of these flying vehicles in some of the more recent promotional images. Perhaps most intriguing, the Disciples of Anu will not only be receiving the beast mount that was teased back in March, but they'll also be receiving at least 2 other types of vehicles. The first is the transport blimp that was teased as far back as last year, and the other is simply referred to as the battleship, implying either a massive airship or perhaps the game's first nautical vehicle, not counting the floating Phoenix base, of course. The Pandora virus will also be getting some additional support, in the form of not only the Juggernaut, which was officially revealed last month, but also a mysterious new mutant known as the Flyer, possibly a reference to one of the earlier pieces of concept art, one of which showed a creature previously referred to as the Floater. Even more exciting, the development roadmap gives us another hint about the game's research system. It mentions that the game will have 3 types of labs: cybernetics, mutation, and quantum. This just happens to line up with the game's 3 main NPC factions, with New Jericho controlling cybernetics research, the Disciples controlling mutation research, and Sanhedrion apparently controlling quantum research, whatever that means. Now, it's going to be a while before we actually get our hands on any of this new content, but it's important to remember that even though we're not getting a new playable build in the immediate future, the developers are still hard at work behind the scenes. They're constantly working on all sorts of things that just aren't suitable for showcasing, or that they would prefer to keep secret until the game's full release next year. That said, the developers have recently released a tentative list of the system specs that they're currently aiming for. I think I've made it pretty clear in the past that I'm a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to computer jargon. I'll just save myself some embarrassment and post the information they've released on screen, so you can read it for yourself. Just keep in mind, the game is still in active development, so none of this information is final. All done? Okay, moving on. Now, we've pretty much covered everything about the game's development from July, but we do have one last piece of news. Alan Stroud recently confirmed that the Briefing number 6 will be coming out later this month. This new collection of short stories will be loosely themed around the Phoenix Project, and it essentially marks the end of the current fiction, at least for now. Alan has mentioned that he's writing at least 2 of the stories for this final collection, Endings and The Barons. He even went so far as to share some of the details about these stories, including a brief excerpt from one of them. Endings will apparently take place at Randolph Syme's funeral, and will be narrated by Randolph's estranged son, Peter Symes. Randolph is a character who was featured in several of the previous briefings, and he appears to have played a pivotal role in shaping the Phoenix Project during its earliest years. This story promises to be quite intriguing, showcasing the personal costs and sacrifices that came with Randolph's singular focus on understanding the extraterrestrial threat that humanity was facing. The Barons, on the other hand, appears to explore the Pandora virus from a completely different angle. While generally associated with the ocean or other areas that are teeming with life, this new story will instead explore how the virus copes with a dry, barren region such as the deserts of Egypt. And that's pretty much it. There are a few new ads running on Facebook, and Snapshot Games will be announcing a new fanfiction contest sometime after the new briefing is released, but otherwise, that covers pretty much everything we learned about Phoenix Point in July. Given that the next backer build won't be released until November, things are likely to be a little more quiet than usual over the next couple of months. But Snapshot Games has certainly surprised me before. As usual, I'll keep my ear to the ground, just in case any new information pops up. But for now, this is RetconRaider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, although I do love talking about Phoenix Point, you can find out more about the game by visiting the official website, the Facebook page, the YouTube page, the subreddit, the official Discord channel, or the original crowdfunding campaign over on Fig. Links are in the description.